Welcome, 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 everybody. Day 2 of the AV Summit continues. We are here with our good buddy from Parasound, Joe Finn. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Joe?
Oh, we're doing well. We're
Ah,
doing well over here.
Shauna,
Um,
how are you?
Not bad. Still recovering from my crazy weekend.
Oh my gosh, it was
Yes.
wild.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very, very. It was a 3-day music festival in Las Vegas. I
Oh
still have my
wow.
wristbands on. So someone
Any
said,
any really memorable bands? I mean, groups?
yeah, yes.
Yes.
So
Okay.
there, it was amazing, and Sunday was like a completely spiritual experience.
Okay.
So yeah, no, I had a great old time. It kind of sucked because it snowed a few different areas over here on the way
Okay.
back, so there were like some road closures, so we had to
Okay.
take like a 2.5, 3 hour detour to get
Okay.
back home. So that was no, I got home at like 12:30 last night. Not that
Wow.
great. Yeah,
Wow.
but
Not
hey,
good.
hey, we had Gene on our podcast yesterday from Audioholics, and he
Oh
said,
yeah, he's a riot.
yeah, he said Joe Finn is the nicest guy in audio. Like I don't know how you came up, but he's like, yeah, he's the nicest guy in audio, right?
Well, I think the same for Gene. He's a really good guy too. So yeah. But wait a minute. If I'm in audio and you two are on audio and you two are nicer guys than me, how can I be the nicest guy in
Oh,
audio?
I don't think I'm nicer, but yeah. And I said you remind me of like I feel like you're the type of guy who would have like a suitcase, like a briefcase,
Yeah.
I should say. Like I feel like you'd have one. Do you have a leather briefcase?
No, no. If
Ah,
I'm
you
if I'm
killed it.
traveling to go be with one of the reps and go visit accounts or something, I just throw my computer in a backpack with some of the other stuff and off
Ah, all right. I had that image, ruined it.
I go. A leather briefcase. I love it.
And I was just telling these guys about how you're Toastmasters.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I'm doing a presentation tonight that'll take like a half hour, 45 minutes. So I'm excited about that one. It'll be for a group of people like this deal.
Yeah.
So busy day for Joe.
Yes. Well, good. So the topic is frequently asked questions.
Yeah.
Like questions you get a lot at Parasound.
Yeah, so I thought that just kind of look back over some of the things we've done in
right.
past seminars, and
Mhm.
thought, okay, well, why don't we take up this topic? So um, there we
Do you
go.
guys,
Now,
I mean, do you guys get a lot of questions about amplifiers or
Yeah. What are some of the questions you get?
yeah, what do you this is
well,
very curious.
yeah, so I'm gonna just pop up, the little agenda that I put together, what I felt like I would go through,
Let's
but we
see.
tend to get certain questions over and over again. Actually, the most common question I didn't even put up here because the most common question is some variation on this.
All
Okay,
right.
I'm looking at this product and then this one that's just above it. Is this one above it really worth the money? Will I really hear the difference? The problem there, of course, is it's impossible to actually, say for sure that it's, so let's look at an A23 plus, right? 1599, and then you've got an A21 plus, basically twice the money. How can I know? I mean, so let's say, Joe, you buy one and China, you buy one also. Well, it very well could be that Jana buys it and thinks, man, this is absolutely worth the money. This really kills my previous amp. And Joe buys it and thinks, man, I don't think that I really got the value for my investment. How would I ever know that, right? I mean, if I'm going to play both amplifiers for you, like in a store, I'm pretty sure you're going to both hear it, and we'll talk about those things. But is it really worth the money? That's the most often asked question, and it's impossible to truly answer it. So, but yeah, so I just thought I'd put some things up here, and you guys can add into it if you want. But I love jumping on occasionally when you guys are doing your Monday night thing, because by the time you're wrapping it up at 7 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock here. I'm already in bed, right? So I notice you, especially now that you've got FOMO on a lot of these, I
Mhm.
notice that you guys tend to focus in on this. Can you hear the difference between amplifiers question? So a bunch of the slides that we'll go through today deal with that and how I would answer that. We'll talk a little bit about distortion specs because, obviously if somebody can just go to a spec and say, okay, I'm considering, this brand amp or this brand speaker versus that one. If I can home in on this spec and that tells me which one's better, I'd want to buy this one, not that one, right? So
Yeah.
we'll talk about that whole thing a little bit, and then some general amplifier questions and some questions that are specific to Parasound amplifiers. So we'll talk about, things like how do I set my gain controls? Because we get that one all the time. But
Okay.
that's more near the end of the presentation. So
Sure.
I say
sound good
buy
to
the
you guys?
coolest looking one. Buy the coolest looking amplifier.
It's got to
That's
have
what matters
like
to me.
lights and LEDs and flashing stuff, right?
I
That
love
one
it.
just looks classy. The one behind you with the black and the gold trim.
Oh yeah,
That's it.
That's
I'm
the
sold.
JC1 Plus, man. Buy
That's
that
it.
and go big or go home, Joe. That's the deal.
There you go.
You guys are recording, right? So I don't have to record.
Yeah, we got you.
Cool.
Yeah, we're
Very
good.
cool. Okay. So I want to start how I always love starting presentations this way is, I'm going to buy this amplifier, right, to upgrade, and then I'm going to upgrade to those speakers and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people forget the most important thing is collect some new music that's really cool. Mm-hmm. So I want to share with all of you guys who are listening to, and oh, by the way, I still didn't even say thank you. Thank you, Joe and Chana, for having me on this presentation and for having Parasound on it, because I think this is the coolest thing that you guys are actively connecting end consumers. And of course, in this one now, you're also including not only the end consumers, but also people from the trade and us as a manufacturer, because this is a fantastic way for us to be able to talk to customers. So thank you for all the hard work you guys have done in organizing this. I love it.
That's also what I said in the podcast yesterday is you're a very thankful person. You always thank us for everything.
Oh,
I swear to you, you got to watch that. You're going to laugh if you see it.
Cool. I'll have to watch it now after I get done with my Toastmasters thing tonight. But, just think about if you're out there in listening land, think about just reaching out, text, cell phone, email, whatever, to 3 or 4 of your best friends who love this kind of thing, and ask them, tell me 3 albums you think are really cool. And, a little bit more obscure ones, not, Dark Side of the Moon or something that huge numbers of people have. This Jay Giles Band record, Full House, if you just want to throw on some blasting rock and roll and have fun, it's a great one. So I love that one. So Full House is great. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was going to say, I was listening to some music with my wife's dad, and we were just listening to some old school tunes. Like Chano, remember we were talking about Hotel California, right? Is our demo track, right? Just because it breaks it down at the beginning, and then so of course different generations completely, right? Sure. But he was breaking it down for me, like, oh, this guy and the relationship between the guys, and so we were connecting, and he was teaching me all kinds of stuff. I was showing him my system. Yeah. But he was telling me about the artists and the music and the relationship and different things about it. And so there was a cool connection. And we did that with various songs. And we did that, time just flew. So what were we talking about? Were we talking about music, or were we talking about the system, or both?
Both, absolutely. Because that's kind of my point is I don't want, sometimes people focus in so much on certain technical parts of the products and so forth, you forget that, hey, it's all about the music in the end of the day, or the movie, of course, because, you put on a good movie, same thing. UFO, if you like a little heavier rock and roll, all 3 of these are live albums, by the way. UFO is a little heavier. Michael Schenker, the guitar player in UFO when they were a young band, awesome player, and he just is killing it on this record. So part of this was recorded in Chicago, by the way, my hometown, at the Aragon Ballroom, where my parents would have danced when they were young, So
that's
UFO, cool. It's called Strangers in the Night. Again, just a great, fun rock and roll, but this one with a little heavier emphasis, heavy guitar stuff. I put the Allman Brothers live at Fillmore off to the right, and I expanded it a little bit, because to me, if you're a rock and roll fan and you don't have Live at Fillmore in your collection, that's like a crime, because
that's
to
blasphemy.
Me, this may be the best. What do you think, Chana? This may be the best live rock and roll album I have,
There's just something about Allman Brothers Band, man. There is, like, it actually, even their studio recording sounds like I'm at a live show. So the Live at Fillmore one is like the cream of the crop for their live recording. So no, it's a great one. I love it.
And again, these guys were 23, 24 years old. Dwayne was literally about 60 days, I think, away from his untimely passing in a motorcycle accident. So, these were young guys just making incredible music and improvisationally too. I mean, it was never the same playing every night, right?
Are you a musician also, Joe?
I wish I was. I do play the radio. I'm very good at that. Play the CD player and so forth. But no, I would love to be a musician. Trust me, in my retirement, if I make it that far, I'm picking up, either keyboard or drums for sure.
So now that you told me you killed my dream of you having a briefcase, then I'm imagining you with a guitar now. Joe Finn and the guitar.
Woo!
Let's go.
Yeah. Well, one little plug for Parasound, by the way, of course, we consider ourselves to be the value-oriented guys. And, so as far as value goes, if we can save you a little bit, you don't have to spend quite as much money on the equipment. You've got more money left over to buy new music, right? So there's that.
Well, I love what you say all the time. Is every time I talk to you, you say, we're not the least expensive, we're not the most expensive.
Right.
That's a great way to put it, because some people always want the least expensive stuff.
And that's cool.
And yeah. So what would you say about that?
I see that's totally cool. And if somebody said, well, I want the most expensive one, this Parasound one is not high end enough for me. Absolutely. In every category that we make product, there's considerably more high end than we go. Mm. But where we're coming from is we try to listen to those really high end ones and make something that comes as close as possible for the money, so that when you compare it, you think, yeah, this is, it cost me X amount of money, but it's a great value. And here for our giveaway, and of course you guys always ask us, do we want to have a giveaway for your customers? Absolutely, we always do. So this time we're giving away a Z-Phono XRM for two reasons. One of them is the second bullet. Almost 28 million LPs were sold in the United States alone last year. Think about that.
Wow.
Last year, for the first time since about 1986, 1987, somewhere in there, was the first year that LP sales actually exceeded CD sales. Now, of course, so many people are streaming these days that we can't leave that out of the picture, but 15 years in a row, more LPs have been sold than before. So the vinyl thing, it's a real thing. If you really like your system and you haven't added a turntable, you really want to do that, because you can get things out of a really well-recorded LP that you can't get out of the same thing on CD. So this particular product, the Z-Phono, this retails for $499. We just lowered the price. That's the other reason we wanted to give this one away. It got rave reviews at $599, but we repriced the Z-Phono XRM specifically because, we've repriced it, and we want to just call a little attention to that fact. For $499, I don't know of a comparable product that has a stereo mono mode. You can do that easily. An on-off switch for the rumble filter, so you can do really low-end rumble filter. Obviously, it's both moving magnet and moving coil, but here's some really cool features that you just typically don't get for $500 retail. You can vary the load impedance when you're on moving coil to match almost any moving coil cartridge combination, combination of cartridge, tone arm, turntable. That's really important because you're trying to advise somebody on what they should buy in terms of a phono preamp. You have no idea really how their turntable and cartridge combination sounds. Doesn't make any difference. They can take it home and just spin the dial from 30 on up to 1050 and find where it sounds the best for their combination, and they're good to go. Plus, it's got both regular RCA and balanced outputs as well. So really great value for $500, and we're excited about being able to ship these to one of your fine listeners. You guys want to stop for Gadgetry Tech, getting a good phono preamp to make a much bigger difference than people expect. A lot of people think a cheap preamp is all you need till you get a better one. So very good, Gadgetry Tech. You're the man. Should we stop and take a couple other quick questions? Do you guys have some more, or should I keep rolling?
Yeah, just keep, whatever feels good. Whatever feels good to you. Yeah.
Well, you guys stop me if somebody asks a cool question and you want to just.
Well, I know. Okay? I know. Was it Keeping Up with the Joneses says, I ask Joe every time for Parasound to make an 11-channel amplifier, and I think we all know the answer to that. It's probably just going to be way too big and like 600 pounds and like $10,000 or something.
Well, if we do it Class D, and we're going to talk about Class D a little later in the presentation, if we do it Class D, then that opens up a lot of possibilities because, now the really big, physically big things that you need to put in a high-end amplifier can be much more modestly sized with Class D.
What are you trying to say, Joe?
Well, I think we should. I mean, obviously, we have 3-channel and 5-channel amps now, as well as our 2-channel amps. But I keep pushing for, let's build at least a 7-channel amp, and maybe we'll wind up building bigger ones after that too. But you guys are right. The biggest issue for us is we would have to make those Class D, but that's okay because Class D is getting better and better.
All right.
We'll deal with that a little bit more a little later. We'll talk about Class D.
All right.
So let's use a slide like we always do for the customers who aren't aware of Parasound, who we are and what we're all about. Mm-hmm. When we say value engineered products since 1981, really Richard Schramm, this fella in the blue shirt on the right, has never varied.
We're not seeing your screen, but I can.
You're not.
No, it's okay. Go ahead and you can try to share your screen if you'd like, but I can pull up this from your website. I have Richard right here.
Here, I got a whole presentation, man. So I hit share screen, and then do you want me to click on that and then hit share?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you are. Boom.
All right. So
go ahead, go to your presentation.
Okay.
Go to your presentation.
Okay. Now I see my presentation, so I think I've already gone to it.
Okay. No, we don't see it.
That's not good.
We see. So I'll put up this in the. Okay, there we go. I see your presentation now.
Okay, you see it now?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, we're good.
I can't see you, but that's all right. As long as you speak to me, that's fine. All right. So can you see it full screen?
Yes.
That's really awesome. So, now I'm seeing two things. Here, let me on this screen go back. All right, so I see the agenda screen on one of these things. Mm-hmm. All right, so do you see my agenda screen right now?
Yes.
I see. Yes, I
see.
Welcome
HiFi Summit. That one.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So now, if I click Fun with Stereo, do you see my 3 favorite albums that I put up?
No, I see your other one. Maybe you have 2 windows open.
Yeah. So why don't
That's okay.
Oh.
It's all right. I just want to hear from you, Joe.
I know, but now I'm confused, and I don't want to be confused. I want to just be rolling. So what if I do this? Let me think about shutting off my monitor entirely.
Yeah.
All right. Now, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
That's awesome. So your customers can see my screen.
Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right. Now, whoops. Now I've lost my. Oh, this is not good because now I've lost my mouse, so I can't control the PowerPoint. So now let's bring up my monitor again so I can get my mouse back over onto.
There we go. Yeah, that I see.
Oh, it's 3 favorite albums.
That I see. Let's just keep it there.
Yeah.
All right.
Keep it right there.
All right, good. So there we go. Now you see the giveaway.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so you see the Z-Phono XRM, and you see the back where I was referring to the.
I actually had that up on the screen in the meantime because we weren't seeing it. I put it up on the screen for them. There we go.
Perfect. And now you see Richard and John Curl. So Richard's the guy in the blue shirt. Oh, let me just Okay, let's keep it this way. Richard's the guy in the blue shirt, and John Curl, who obviously is the JC in JC1 Plus or JC5 or whatever, he's the guy on the left-hand side. But Richard's original mission never has strayed. His original mission has always been value engineering. Try to look at a product that's more expensive than this one and make this one come as close as possible to that more expensive one. So for 40 years, we've kind of been doing really the same thing over and over again. And we just keep getting more and more successful. John Curl is actually the guy on the left in the yellow shirt is actually in the Absolute Sound Hall of Fame. I didn't even know they had a Hall of Fame until I found out about Curl being in it. But he worked with the Grateful Dead and Jefferson Airplane and some of the other San Francisco-based bands in the 70s. But the key to all this is we're doing US-based design and engineering, and then we're building it with 3 trusted vendor partners over in Taiwan, because certainly we could build all of our products here. They would be quite a bit more expensive if we did it that way. So, this is kind of our approach to value engineering. Is all the engineering is done here, and then it's built, not in the least expensive factory we can find, but instead by these 3 trusted, partners that we have. And now you can see this great design and efficient manufacturing slide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just talking a little bit about the JC1 Plus, because it's the best amplifier that we've ever done. And we just got a review from Tone Audio talking about, can't find this much sonic excellence for anywhere near the asking price of these amps. I mean, it's an incredible review.
Is it the best looking amp, would you say? Your opinion.
It's certainly the best sounding product we've ever made, and I think probably the best looking as well.
See what I said earlier? Just pick the best looking one. There it is.
There you go,
Told
Joe.
you.
Love the silver too.
I love the signature. Anyway.
Yeah, when our dealers ask about putting product on display, we tell them display the silver, because almost everybody makes black, but you'll really be eye grabbing if you display it in silver. So let's move to this question now that has come up, I think, more and more now that you've had FOMO on as a regular featured guest. Is that his title?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess. He's one of our video guys, right? So Chana does video, and I don't do so much video, but he is an expert when it comes to the more of the video side, TVs and things.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But the question really that's come up several times in your presentations is, if I buy a better amplifier, and I'm an average person, will I be able to hear the difference?
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a fine question. And since so many of your customers seem to be interested in it, let's kind of tackle how we would answer it. Okay. So first off, let's just take a moment to think about, let's say you buy a pair of JC1 Pluses, Joe or Chana. Okay. Mm-hmm. What are you really getting? Well, one of the things you'd be getting versus one of our, amplifiers that maybe cost $1,000 or $2,000 is you'll notice that the imaging, where the instruments seem to be placed in the soundstage, really gets better. And both in terms of, the breadth of it, so left and right and even up and down imaging, and also the soundstage depth, like really being able to hear, where specific instruments are. That part is incredible if you look at an amplifier like a JC1 Plus or a JC5. The deep bass, as you get better and better in our amplifiers, it just keeps getting better and better, because we're able to throw more at the product that will result in the ability to deliver enough current so that you get better deep bass. I think specifically in a JC1 Plus, you've got incredibly tube-like highs, because now we can go really up we can up the amount of Class A sound that we can give you, out of a solid state amplifier. And the dynamics keep getting better and better. I mean, I love the sound of a, let's say, an NC275 that you can get for the $1,000 kind of price range, but it just doesn't have the dynamics that you get out of a JC5 or a JC1 Plus. And you get all this, of course, with solid state reliability. Well, now let's take a step into what are the factors in how we perceive a system's sound? Because again, Chana might buy let's say our Halo Hint 6 integrated, and so does Joe. But what are the things that are different when they each take them home? So the first is, which speakers did you choose? Because Chana may have chosen a speaker with a very difficult impedance load to drive, and maybe Joe picked one with a very easy load. Like, for example, this one that we have here, the Tecton, I'm pretty sure this is the double impact. It's a very efficient speaker, and from an efficiency standpoint, it's very easy to drive. By the way, that's different from, is it a difficult impedance load? Because impedance, we're talking about 8 ohms, dipping down to 4, dipping down to 2, because as you guys know, music is dynamic. All right, now how about their listening habits? If we talk about my wife, Mary, she tends to play the country music station.
She tends to crank it, huh?
Yeah. No, she tends to play the country stuff and tends to play it pretty low, okay? Well, there are definitely differences in a lesser to a better amplifier, even at low volume, but you won't get as much of that as if you tend to play, the 1812 Overture at pretty realistic concert level volumes. It's much easier to hear, a better amplifier, okay? So how difficult is the impedance load? Is it an efficient speaker or not? What are the customer's listening habits? Is it a bright reflective room or is it a very absorptive room? That's going to play into it. In fact, if you go on the Audiophiliac's YouTube channels. That's Steve Gutenberg. Do you guys know him?
Yeah.
Great guy. He did a video with Paul DiComo, my old friend who hired me at Definitive and at Polk, and whose house is about 2 miles from here. Paul just passed away a few weeks ago. But Paul did a video of all the little modifications he did in his room that made his system come alive and sound better. And there's like over 20,000 views, I think, now on that one. So if you go to the Audiophiliac channel, you'll see that. All right, now let's think about taking all those factors in. Do all quality amps just sound the same? Our answer would be they sound similar, but with audible differences. And I want to give you a couple examples. When the JC1 Plus was getting ready to ship, we went to a very friendly offsite person, a guy who's retired and is great friends with Phil. You know Phil Jackson. He's great friends with Phil, and he had the JC1 originals. So Phil took over the prototypes of the new JC1 Plus and of the JC5. They did detailed listening comparisons, pulled out all kinds of albums, did this over 3 to 4 weeks, and then started, after they'd noted all the things that they heard, they started bringing in friends of theirs to also listen. And when you talk about things like being able to hear specific instruments and localize them, you know, the depth and the tonal balance and the deep bass extension, everybody said, yep, JC5 is really good. JC1, a pair of them, in a number of these respects, even better. JC1 Plus, clearly a step ahead, you know, because the JC1 was originally designed and first shipped in 2003. From there until 2019, you know, we learned a ton of things, but everybody agreed. Oh yeah, in direct comparison, it just keeps getting better as you move up. Okay. So let's now introduce another couple of things. Remember that it's not just about what you hear, it's about the reliability and the build quality. I'm telling you, there are vendors who, and you and I kind of talked about this the other day, Joe. There are vendors who, you know, okay, so it's this many watts per channel and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, well, that guy does it, you know, for $300 less money than Parasound. Why don't I just get that one?
Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons people buy Parasound is because after 40 years, they know our reliability is excellent. And same thing with fit and finish. I threw a little photo of a Rolex down there. If I offered to buy both of you guys a watch, would you rather have the Rolex or the Timex?
You can buy me a Rolex. It's cool.
See? But in terms of which one of them keeps better time, did you know that over the course of a year, just, you know, by a second or so, the Timex will actually keep better time than the Rolex? Well, so what? You'd much rather have a Rolex if I'm buying you the watch.
Like I said earlier, whichever one looks the coolest.
That's right. Fit and finish does matter, right? So, but now let's think of all of that from this perspective. Think about the imaging that we talked about and the soundstage depth and that ultra smooth high end and how incredibly realistic sounding a kick drum can be and differentiated from the bass, which is also thumping away. Which spec on the spec sheet, or if you look at our website, which spec tells you about those things? And the honest answer is none of them. There isn't an imaging spec. I mean, let's imagine for a moment that you're looking at our amp and another brand amp, and that their amp has a 92 imaging spec, and ours is only an 81 imaging spec. Well, you'd want.
What does that even mean?
There is no imaging spec, right? I'm not telling you guys that specifications don't matter, because they do. Specifications are important in terms of the consumer understanding what a better product is all about. But what I am saying to you is that both listening to the product and looking at the specifications, both of those things matter, okay? And I know that especially for your audience that's joining us today online, that can be harder and harder in this era of fewer and fewer stereo stores, right? When I was first selling, when I was 22 years old,
wow,
there was loads of stereo stores, man.
Yeah.
Now it's very much fewer. So it's harder and harder to get a place to go and listen. But if you go and listen, you find out very quickly that the fit and finish, the reliability, and especially the sound quality between two products that look very similar when you look at their spec sheets are oftentimes not very similar at all.
Here's a good question. If you don't mind taking this question from
please.
Kyle Life of Bliss, he says, do you guys think it's easier to pick out a good app or a bad app in a blind test? For me, I feel it's harder to notice differences with good sounding apps, but a bad app lets itself be known?
That's a really fascinating question. I've never heard it asked that way before, but I do think that you said Kyle's his name.
Yes, Kyle.
I think he's on the right track, that it's easier. So if you're listening to, let's just say, the better amp, right? And then you switch over to the lesser amp, it's kind of easier for me, I think, to pick out, oh yeah, the bass isn't as impressive, or the high end, or whatever it is. Yeah, I think he's got a real point there, that it can be easier to pick up on the weaknesses of the lesser amp.
Yeah, especially when you start hitting the limits of the amp. When you're starting to get into distortion, like, oh, okay, this got to distortion. This other amp has more than enough power, and it's just playing clean. That's an easy thing to distinguish, right?
Exactly. And then this will be the last slide, I think, on this part of it. How are we doing on time, by the way?
Oh, we're good.
We're okay. All right. So this will be the last slide on this part of it. But even the distortion specs, because all amplifiers will have distortion specs, they don't necessarily delineate things like, are we talking about even order harmonic distortion or odd order harmonic distortion? So in other words, here's the fundamental note, ding, whether that's 440 or wherever it is. There are harmonics of that note, right? That's how we can distinguish, when the flute player plays a specific note and the clarinetist plays the same note. Well, they sound different, right? Because the harmonic structure of those two instruments is different. So are we talking, when we look at two amplifiers with distortion specs, you mean even order or odd order? In our view, odd order harmonics are much more fatiguing. And so one of the things we try to eliminate when we're designing amplifiers is that odd order harmonic distortion component that just gets grating over time, right? Where do you find that on the spec sheet? No, you don't. Nobody talks about that. Even when you read that this is a 100-watt amplifier at 8 ohms at X amount of distortion, right? Well, that's measured with an 8 ohm load resistor. It's not measured with a pair of Klipsch corner horns or with a pair of quads or whichever is your favorite speaker. So, not to go overboard on this whole thing, but I really wanted to just take some time to explain that from our point of view, specs are important, but they really don't tell you the full story about an amplifier. And we say, yes, average listeners, not necessarily audiophiles, but average listeners can pick up on it almost every time. And I think, one of the ways I would back that up is this is obviously a photo of me from back in October 2019 at the Rocky Mountain Audio Fest, which is a consumer show. It's not like CES in Vegas. It's for the trade. It's a consumer show. We did listening tests over and over and over again because we were both showing our, at that time, brand new Classic 200 integrated. So, $1,200 for the whole kit and caboodle. But also the JC5 had only come out, I don't know, maybe 6 months before, something like that. So we had that paired up with a JC2 BP, and the new Classic 200 sounded really good. Every person we played it for picked out the much better amp and preamp as unmistakably a better sounding combination, So yeah, do these amps all sound different? Absolutely they do. And can average people tell? Every single person who was there, it never missed. Nobody ever said, oh, I don't hear the difference, ever. And then I suppose a last point is that features matter too. So, you look at a product like our Halo Hint 6, okay? So anybody who's ever done, some extensive listening with headphones, and I see you guys both have a high quality pair of phones on, you can buy a cheap headphone amp out in the marketplace for dirt cheap and throw it into your amplifier. We put a really good one in there. Look at the aux. You take a look at the smartphone. Everybody's walking around with all kinds of music in these things nowadays, but this was never intended to be an audiophile grade device. Well, we put a 12 dB boost into that little aux. I think you can see, oops, there we go. Mm-hmm. Into that little aux input. So that, your Uncle Ralph comes over and he's eager to show you some new music. Well, plug in and, now this thing can sound more like an audiophile device and less like a smartphone because we got a 12 dB boost in there to help it up.
Uncle Ralph is crazy.
I hate that guy.
Yeah. Or even, a feature like a sub-level control. You're listening to all your old Beatles and Stones last night. Well, now you've got much more modern music that's recorded with much more realistic sounding bass. well, you're going to want to go cut back a little bit on your subwoofer levels, but you don't have to go into the sub or subs and individually do that. You can just grab the level control on the front of the amp and do it. So yeah, so in lots and lots of ways, we think, there are a lot of differences. I want to make sure we leave time for questions.
Yeah.
And I've got, 6 minutes till.
Okay.
I got more things that I can show you, but do you want to just stop and see if there are some questions that have rolled in, or encourage people to ask questions at this point?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do it, man.
All right. So let me just take this presentation off the screen for a second. I can always put it back on.
Sure.
But if you have any questions for Joe, go ahead and ask now.
I got one.
Go ahead.
Okay, when we're talking about the difference between amplifiers, like less expensive, more expensive, would I notice the difference in prolonged listening? Like, for instance, my wife has been watching TV this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So that amplifier is on this whole time, right? We're going to be done in like 6, 7. TV's still going to be on. Finally, 8, 9 o'clock, I want to watch Dune, right? Now, here's the thing. Like, how well will the less expensive amplifier handle a full 10 hours of being on and producing audio? So, I mean, she's watching, like, I can't hear anything right now, so it's probably not too loud. But as soon as we get to Dune, I'm going to be cranking that sucker, right?
I want to watch later, too. So you're saying that a less expensive amplifier is going to be all tired to be like, I'm too tired for you, Chana.
Is there fatigue if you're doing like something like that in a lower price amplifier?
I've never thought about it exactly that way before, but here's how I'll answer. I think over time, both a lesser expensive and a better quality amplifier, assuming that they're both pretty good amps. I mean, like, you research the market, and for $999, for $1,000, this is a pretty good amp, or for $3,000, it's a pretty good amp. Okay. Both of those, I think, over time will sound about like they did 10 or 12 hours ago, but certainly the lesser expensive amp, I would expect, would be more fatiguing as you continue to listen. So, at 8 or 9 o'clock, Dune comes on and you sit down and start listening for the first time. I would expect that 2 hours later, with a better amp, certainly with a better Parasound, there would be less listening fatigue as you go. Okay. We always strive to minimize the odd order harmonic distortion, and a lesser expensive amp is probably more prone to having odd order harmonic distortion, but I'm not necessarily sure that lesser expensive amp is tired 10 or 12 hours later.
You're tired, Chana. Yeah. You're just tired of hearing it.
Does that answer make sense? Yeah, you'll be more tired of hearing it, but I think the amp will be performing basically like it did when it started.
Okay.
All right. Cool. Well, so, can I disagree with you now, or do you want me to disagree with you in the after show?
You can disagree anytime.
What? No, I'm just, I want to be respectful because this is your time, Joe.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I just wanted to give the other side of, this whole thing.
Because you already heard what I had to say in the Daily HiFi podcast, so.
Well, I heard a little bit of it anyhow. Yeah.
Well, my impression is just that give me a chance to sell some Parasound for a second. If I were, all right, so I'm Joe Finn right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say, you know what? A lot of folks just like nice stuff, right? Yeah. So if you like nice stuff, so we're talking about the actual output of amplifiers and what's measurable. That's one thing, right? Mm-hmm. So some people want that. But like you're saying, what's the measurement for just something that's a nice product that will be well supported? The fact that you guys will support a product that's, however old, and you guys will still support it. Where is that on the spec sheet? Nowhere. Right. Or the fact that I have a Parasound A52 Plus, right?
Yep.
When I look at it and it looks cool over there, and I know how heavy it is, and I know the build quality, and it makes me feel good knowing that that's in my system. Where's that in the spec sheet? Nowhere. Yep. Right. How about if I get some speakers in for review, and the fact that they ask me, so what amp are you going to be running, and I tell them Parasound A52 Plus, they never question like, well, I don't know if that's going to be good enough. Never. So the fact that I don't have to deal with that, boom, I'm sold, right? So these are things like people who have enough to spend on certain quality of amplifier, they don't want to question whether it's a good amplifier. They don't want to look at the specs. They're just like, you know what? I have a certain amount of money. I'm going to give it to you. Give me something good. The end.
Good one. The
Right?
end.
And also that looks cool, by the way. So all these things. So that's how I feel about Parasound. I don't doubt anything, right? If I get a Parasound product, I know it's going to be a certain level of quality, and I know it's going to be value.
Yep.
Right. Lots of value, and of course, if you can afford more expensive, then you're going to still retain that same level of value. And that's how I look at it. I wouldn't want to compare it spec for spec because there's other intangibles.
Yeah,
there's other intangibles that we got to look at. And I would say, for me, I don't mind being just honest about it. Like I really do like the way it looks. I like the logo. I like this and that. So if you're willing to pay for that, there's nothing wrong with that either.
That's right. I sold a ton of Macintosh when I was a young guy and selling Mac amps on the retail floor. So I asked one of the Mac reps one day, because at that time anyway, they had where you could buy like a 2205 with the cool blue meters or a 2200, exact same amp, but less money because it had a sort of a more plain front panel and no meters.
No meters.
Right. The same exact insides. I mean, to a resistor, same exact insides. And I asked him, so, I mean, because the non-metered one is less money, I would imagine you sell more of those than the metered ones, right? And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, no, we sell about 4 times as many of the metered ones as we do the non-metered one. And I was astonished. And he said, look, people who are buying nice things want it to look good.
That's right.
And the story.
Can we have some Parasound with some meters then?
Macintosh amp without meters, like cereal without milk. Like how does this work? Like, don't want that.
Yeah, but it just never occurred to me that they would be selling so many more of the. And then, of course, I think they've really more or less stopped making the non-metered ones. I don't know that they have a whole lot of non-metered amps anymore. I don't know. But anyways, so are we running up at the edge of time, or should I keep presenting, or what do you guys want to do?
I think we got, like 15 minutes if you want to keep going?
Okay.
Just keep asking.
I got a few more slides to show.
Okay, go ahead. I got you.
Probably are some, we referred to Class D and so forth earlier, and probably some of your listeners aren't, that can be a little confusing to people at times. Pardon me. So on the left, you see a tube amplifier that I kind of deliberately, tried to pick one that wouldn't make it really obvious, what brand it is.
Sure.
And then on the right is a Parasound A21 Plus. And one of the truisms about all amplifiers is amplifying a signal is inherently inefficient. A lot of that energy just gets thrown off as heat. It doesn't get turned into audio energy, it gets turned into heat, just kind of the way it is. Class A amplifiers, like the tube amp on the left, tend to sound really good. But all Class A amps, and therefore, all tube amplifiers, it's the lowest wattage per dollar. It's the most inefficient. So typically, if you have, want a 250 or 300 watt amplifier, if that's a tube amplifier, it's probably a pretty big amp, and it's probably heating up your room pretty much because, pure Class A amps just generate a lot of heat. What we tend to do is what's over on the right. So all of our amplifiers are solid state, but we make Class AB amps. So we run them as high as we can for that price point in Class A, and then we switch over to Class B, because the benefit of Class B is you can offer somebody a lot of power. It might not be quite as low in distortion, but it's a lot of power for the size cabinet and for the money. So, you're listening to the 1812 Overture and kaboom, in comes the whole orchestra and the cannons and so forth. Well, you've got lots of power reserve. And because there's so much additional material, you won't tend to notice the distortion so much. Okay.
Is that when it says high bias Class A, is that what we're referring to? So
yes.
I'll be honest, Joe, when I see that on the A52 Plus, I don't know how much wattage it is, right? That is in that Class A territory, but it doesn't even matter to me. Like I'm just gonna be honest with my audience and you guys. I just like the fact that I can say it's Class A.
Yeah.
Up to a certain point. Like, to me, that's cool. You know, that's how some of us are just crazy like that. So
Well,
it's worth it to me. I bought mine, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
I get lots of stuff sent in for review, and I bought my A52 Plus. So just putting it out there. All right.
Thank you for doing so.
All right.
Yeah, and we get that question actually frequently, Joe, is, hey, I'm looking at, buying one of your A23s. And how high does it go in Class A? I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. The fact is we tend to bias them a little higher so we can go higher in Class A, and then we switch over.
That's awesome.
However, having said all that, we talked earlier about Class D. Class D are very efficient. There's very little heat thrown off in a Class D amp. So, for example, if you look at, maybe like our ZM4, so you've got at home 4 zones. You've got a custom guy helping you do your system, and you've got 4 other zones. The master bedroom, the outdoor zone, the spare bedroom, the den, the kitchen, whatever it is. You want those 4 zones to sound as good as you can have it sound. Well, that ZM4, that's a Class D amplifier, because we are expecting that you will put it in a rack, and we want it to throw off as little heat as it can throw off. Okay. So it's really simple. We build a Class D amp. Class D is highly efficient and throws off very little heat. It's the coolest running of the 3 amps we're talking about here by far. And very limited space, by the way, for high power output. This amp, you can see this slide, right? A slide of the Zone Master 23.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, that's, a 2U high amp. It's capable of 350 watts into an 8 ohm load. Okay. It can output a ton of power for such a compact and cool running amplifier. The truth is that Class D years ago, so let's say in the 90s maybe, all the Class D amps, none of them really sounded very good at all. They just didn't. There wasn't, as far as I know anyway, any Class D amps that really sounded good. But now you're finding people like Pascal and Ice Power and so forth that are making much better sounding Class D modules than what used to happen. So we can take and engineer the rest of the amplifier in combination with those power modules to make Class D sound really good. And now you've got, massive power capable of a modestly sized package. That's where I was saying earlier, we can make a 7-channel amp that's powerful in Class D and not have it be a monstrous thing so it doesn't take up all your rack space. And that's where I would like to see us go. And we've talked about it quite a bit in our new product development meetings. And then this is a very commonly asked question, the auto turn-on circuit. Sometimes people will call up and say, man, my Parasound amp, I just bought it. It won't even turn on. Well, probably they've got this little bit here that you can see kind of over on the left-hand side of the amplifier. If you switch it to 12-volt trigger so that, you turn on your preamp with the remote, it automatically turns on the amp. That will defeat the power button on the front, because we don't want the cleaning service to be, turning on and off your amplifier for you. So if you have this operate in 12-volt trigger, when you turn on the remote for your preamp, bang, it automatically turns on the amp. Same thing when you turn it off, but it defeats the power button on the front. So that's a question that we get a lot. This is probably the single most commonly asked question about a Parasound amp is, where do I set my gain controls? Because, not a lot of amplifier vendors will have separate gain controls. You see those 2 red arrows, right? So what are we doing and why do we do it? Well, you've got independent gain controls on there. And what we always say is always start with them all the way open. Start with them on max. So you're letting your preamp have all the control at that point of how much volume there is or isn't, because you've got full amplifier output. But sometimes you don't necessarily want full amplifier output. So let's say Chana, in your home, where you're going to put your system in the living room, but you can't put it right in the center of the wall. So it's, centered with your seated listening position. You've got to move it over a little bit because you've got a hallway or an entrance to the kitchen or whatever it is. So now your left speaker, let's say, is closer to the corner. Well, guess what? Your left speaker is going to be louder than your right one simply because you've got that corner reinforcement. Okay?
Sure, yeah.
Well, just take the left channel and turn it down a little bit, turn that off of max a little bit, and bang, you're right where you want to be. Or maybe Joe buys the same amp and now he's got a tube preamp that he really loves that he's got from years ago. Well, maybe it doesn't get as loud. Okay, So maybe the two of you are going to adjust your gain controls based on which preamp you own. But always the answer to that one is start with these things all the way open, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's that. Those two controls, though, open up something that we call vertical biamping, which we think is really, really cool. So sometimes people will say, I bought an A23 years ago. I want to get a second one now so I can put the two of them in mono and, I'll have doubled my power. Okay, fair enough. But there really are some inherent drawbacks to doing it that way. What we'd rather see you do is take those two amplifiers and do what we call vertical biamp. So you'll notice, in fact, let me even just switch to the next one. So let's just look at the back here of this A23 Plus, and you notice that we have obviously speaker outputs, okay, but we've also got a right channel and a left channel RCA, right? Sitting next to it, there's what we call the loop output. So why do we have that? Well, let's just move back a slide. You can see, I hope you can see anyway in this slide. Yep. And by the way, let's just clarify with that Polk speaker that's on the left-hand side, this vertical biamping is only possible if in fact you've got a pair of speakers that has a set of binding posts for the mid and high end and a separate set of binding posts for the low end. If you've just got, single speaker wires, you go left and right and you keep the little plate that they have that connects the two of them so that there's no electrical problem. But if you're going to do this vertical biamping thing, you take that connector away. Now, let's look back at the back of this JC5. You see where we've got, let's see if I can get my cursor on it. You see where we've got one RCA cable coming into the JC5. And then we've got this orange RCA cable, I think it's orange, maybe it's red, connecting from the left output into the right, okay? So that this amplifier's left and right channel output are now the same. But now you can take the fact that we've got the dual sets of binding posts down at the bottom, connect one to the base of, let's say in this case, the left channel speaker, and one to the mid and high end. And now you've got a situation where this one amplifier using both channels, one of the channels is operating the bass only, one of the channels is operating the mid-high. Well, what the heck is the benefit of that? Well, number one, you've got volume pots, those gain controls. You can adjust the mid-high and the bass so that they're now perfect. But secondly, you've got far more amplifier power going to bass only and mid-high only, but there's no interference between, with the crossover. There's no back EMF coming off of the woofer and muddying everything up. So you've got quantitatively better output and qualitatively. In other words, it's more powerful, it can play louder, but it's going to sound unmistakably cleaner and clearer as well. And then this next one, we just kind of detail that, you're not going to have bridged mono impedance issues. You're not going to have bridged mono heat issues. You get cleaner and clearer mid-range and high-end and better bass. Lower overall distortion, better headroom. You've got all the positives of doing 2 amps bridged in mono with none of the negatives of 2 amps bridged in mono.
Are you saying you can kind of change up the balance between the mids and highs and the bass by adjusting the balance on there? Exactly. I've never tried it myself, so that's kind of something to think about.
Yeah, if you use the gain controls, because again, you've now got this stereo amp. One side of it is operating the bass for your left channel speaker. The other side of it is operating the mid and high. So you want to have that flexibility of being able to blend the two together if it's not quite right when you start. All right.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, man. I want to say a sincere thank you again, Joe and Chana and Michael as well. He's not on the call right now, but and to all the AV Summit attendees who've been following along with our presentation. And again, just kind of throw it open to any questions or anything else you guys want to bring up.
Yeah, so I wanted to show your virtual booth here.
Okay.
So for the folks who are attendees, you can click on Parasound, and on Thursday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific, hopefully, Joe, you'll have time to be in this meeting room because it's your dedicated Zoom meeting room. And for anybody who wants to go in there and ask questions to Joe, or for businesses inquiring perhaps doing some business with Parasound, that's your opportunity there to have a meeting. So there you'll have contact information and information as far as their social media links, and their giveaway is here if you want to win that Z-Phono preamp.
XRM. Yeah.
Yeah, XRM. Yes.
Yep.
So there it is. That's what I wanted to show. And Joe, after this, if you have a minute, I don't know if you have your talk after this. When's your thing? Because if
So I can spare you like 15 minutes or so
Okay.
if you want, and then I do need to prepare for that other presentation, unfortunately. But yeah,
sounds good. Well,
yeah.
then don't leave here. I'll leave a link to the lobby. So afterwards, attendees go to the lobby, and Joe Finn will be there. You can ask him some questions for about 15 minutes.
Cool.
That's it.
That's right. Thank you so much, Joe, and everybody watching. Thank you for hanging out. This is the AV Summit Day 2. Stay tuned. We will be back at 2:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time with Monolith by Monoprice right here. It is the AV Summit, and for all you attendees, I'll see you in the lobby.